So what is the business value of Clojure? Hello, my name is Eric Normand, and these are my thoughts on functional programming. So I was watching a talk by David Nolen the other day. David Nolen is the maintainer of Transcript. He's done quite a lot in the Clojure community. And in the talk, it was to beginner programmers about starting their careers. And kind of at the end, he mentioned that he thinks that for a business, the choice of programming language is mostly a hiring decision. That the programming language is not going to change the business's success. And it's mostly about hiring. And I've been wrestling with that because I've been trying to figure out what the business value of Clojure is. I've thought that maybe it has to do with the reduction of risk, because Clojure lets you quickly experiment, quickly develop solutions, so you can quickly evaluate whether a solution is going to work for you, and so you're mitigating the risk that way because you have such a small investment. But I've been taking to his idea more and more, so I want to explore that more deeply. So when you choose a programming language, unless it is something super specialized that gives you a huge advantage in the area you're in, and I'm thinking of something like if you choose Rails, Ruby and Rails for your architecture because you're doing like quick one-off web apps, like that might give you enough advantage to warrant you choosing that just for the business value. But what he was saying was, in the long term, what really matters is the processes and the thinking and the architecture of your system and how well you program it. And I have to agree with that. So does that leave any room for Clojure? Why wouldn't you just go, if it's a hiring decision, why wouldn't you just go with Java or JavaScript or Ruby, some of the most popular languages out there? Because then you'd have more hiring options, right? But when you choose a more obscure language like Clojure, you're actually choosing who you can hire or who you will be hiring. So you're choosing a hiring pool. So the advantage of Clojure is that you will be hiring Clojurists and tapping into that community, which to me it makes a lot of sense. Clojurists are different from Javaists, on average, and that's all you can do when you're looking at programmers as an aggregate. You kind of have to average them out, or So here's the thing about hiring and about getting hired, that ultimately it's kind of a numbers game, but you only need to hire one person for your position, or you only need one job. So it doesn't matter how many, ultimately at the end, it doesn't matter how many candidates there are or how many jobs there are that you could get, because you only need the one. So if you want to play it as a numbers game, like I'm going to use Java in my company because I can always find Java programmers. You'd have to imagine the kind of programmer you're going to get, because there are a lot of Java programmers, but just by the fact that Java is taught at a lot of universities, it might be that programmers' only real language, only language that they've worked in before. And so you have to think that is going to affect the quality of the candidate. A candidate who knows several languages and has been part of different communities and understands things from different angles is going to be a better programmer. And typically that's what you get with a more obscure language like Java. Like Clojure. So, this used to be the case for a language like Python. People used to talk about how Python was a good language to hire for, because knowing Python meant that you were a little bit more curious. You were more willing to learn a new language because you probably didn't have it at your job. You weren't paid to do it, so you were the kind of programmer who would go out of their way, probably in their spare time, to learn a new language. And probably that's the case right now with Clojure. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about what are the benefits of learning Clojure for the applicant, for the job applicant. So, David Nolen mentioned this, that on the programmer side, the real reason to choose one language over another is developer happiness. Of course, there's job pool, right? That's an important consideration. But developer happiness is also a real factor, that if you're happy in one language and not another, you should take that into serious consideration when choosing a language, because it could make a real difference. And so developer happiness, as far as Clojure is concerned, I think that there are two main reasons that Clojure can increase developer happiness. One is that Clojure has very fast feedback. I believe that it is the language that has the best support for REPL-driven development, for interactive programming, for live programming. These are all different ways of saying the same thing, that in Clojure you will write code and you can see whether it works immediately. This is something that you get in most fields of making, of invention. You are doing some woodworking and you pick up a tool and you start carving your block of wood, and you can see, is this tool gonna get me where I want to go? Like, you can tell pretty quickly that you're on the right path. And so you can then get into a nice flow because you are confident that you're moving in the right direction. You can get into a rhythm of working. And one thing that happens a lot in programming is we have to write a lot of code before we see anything work, before we see anything happen. And then we have to go back and figure out why it didn't work. And if that cycle is too long, we there's a lot of stress involved. There's a lot of it's distressing to work and not see the results of your actions. Okay, so that's fast feedback, and I think that can really help developer happiness. The other thing is the amount of BS work that you have to do. So what I mean by that is a lot of languages have you create abstractions just for abstraction's sake, or the abstractions don't really help you with what you're trying to achieve. And I'm going to call out some languages like Java, where it might not be the language itself, but the community certainly is very, very much into abstractions that don't really help, so-called design patterns and things like that, where it's not that the design patterns themselves are wrong, but it's just they're overused and overvalued for what they give you. So, by going with Clojure, you're choosing a language that makes lean abstractions, or just the right kinds of abstractions and amount of abstractions, really easy. And so that's what you're buying into for developer happiness. Just getting rid of all the boilerplate and bureaucracy of the language. Okay, so that's the developer happiness side. But then there's also this other side of buying into a community. You're choosing your peers. You're choosing, because companies should choose the language to pick who they hire, a programmer should pick a language based on who they want to work with, who they want to communicate with, what conferences they want to attend. So that's the community aspect, that if you want to learn what Clojure people talk about, if you want to be involved in that kind of community and be around people who are thinking about the things that Clojure programmers think about, and you can tell what that is by the conference talks and the blog posts and the podcasts and what people are working on, what they're talking about. That's another reason to choose the language. So there you have it. You've got both sides. You've got the hiring side and you've got the being hired side. Like, why choose any particular language? And I just happen to use Clojure as the example there. All right, my name is Eric Normand. Please subscribe. If you enjoyed this, please tell your friends, share it, like it, and I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.